shame me.
Hello, and welcome to Me Screaming into the Void. Today we are talking about my absolute favorite movie. Well, not absolute favorite movie, but definitely top 10. We are talking about Drag Me to Hell from Sam Raimi. Now, I know. Listen, Sam Raimi is known for Evil Dead, and I love those movies, so don't get it twisted. However, Drag Me to Hell just has a very special place in my heart, okay? This movie just doesn't stop. And I love when movies do that they get your attention and they won't release it. And Sam Raimi is so great in his storytelling in this one because he even said he didn't want to get into the splatter and gore too much, even though, sir. But here he really toned it down. Now, for the people I went to the cinema with, half of them left the cinema. We know why. They couldn't take it. And I just couldn't stop watching. And I watched until the end. And even the end is so satisfying. So, without further ado, let's get into it. This movie, as I said before, was released in 2009, directed by Sam Raimi. And it has Alison Lohman as Christine Brown, who's the main character, Justin Long as Clay Dalton, who's her boyfriend. Lorna Raver plays Mrs. Ganoush, who's like one of the main antagonists. The other one is Dilamia. Dilip Rao, who plays Ramjas, who is the psychic. Alison Lohman did her stunts herself, most of them, except for the one in the grave, which, if you see how in one scene she gets thrashed around, I don't know, I would have puked. If I would have been trashed around like she had in that scene, I would have definitely projectile vomited. And Sam Raimi would have been like, keep the camera on her, keep it on her, this is perfect. Sam Raimi in this movie wanted to focus more on the suspense part of the movie instead of the gory part. He is so skillful, making it really suspenseful with shadow play. The sound editing by itself already is enough to scare anyone. So the cinematographer, who is Peter Deming, made sure that he always kept the camera really close to Alison Lohman's face, because he wanted us to feel what she feels. You feel the dread is just there. You're in the middle of it and you can't escape it. So yeah, the extra tight close-ups, really appreciated. Sam Raimi wrote this script with his brother Ivan in 1990, right after they had finished filming Army of Darkness, and it was called The Curse. But somehow they got involved in other projects, so it was put on ice until he, 10 years later, decided to actually make the movie. Fun fact, Sam Raimi asked Edgar Wright to direct the movie, which, I can't imagine, because with Edgar Wright's style, he has a very specific style. That being put on Drag Me to Hell, I don't think it would have worked. I really don't. Because Drag Me to Hell has a certain kind of dread that I personally don't think Edgar Wright would have been able to. So luckily he was busy with Hot Fuzz, and so Sam Raimi directed it himself. Thank the devil, because we're talking about Drag Me to Hell. So the short gist of it is, Christine Brown, this loan officer, is very driven and wants to prove to her boss that she can do anything to get that promotion. And she denies Mrs. Ganoush the bank loan to be able to keep her house from foreclosing. In a fit of rage, Mrs. Ganoush then curses Christine, and she then seeks help from a psychic to help her get rid of the curse. That's basically the very skeleton of the story without any spoilers. And now we're getting into the more detailed and fun parts of it all. So the story starts in 1969 in Pasadena, California, and you see Sean Sandena, who is a medium, who has brought a child who's been cursed, and she tries her best to save that little boy, but he gets dragged to hell. Thus, the name of the movie, Drag Me to Hell. You do ask yourself, what the hell did that little boy do to get cursed? I mean, I think he stole like an amulet. But yeah, still, it's a little boy. So I don't think he deserved to be dragged to hell. So now we are thrown into present tense and we meet Christine, who's on her way to work. She's very ambitious. She wants to get to places. Since she comes from a background that is like, farmers, I'm guessing in society it's looked down upon. I could very much relate to her wanting to present herself in a certain way to be able to move up in society. So she gets to work, and you see that there is this empty space where there is this senior manager position that nobody has filled yet, and her boss is like alluding to the fact that if she works hard and proves herself, she will get the job. However, there's this other guy, Stu. First of all, the name, okay? Stu. Already that makes me stew myself. And he's played by Reggie Lee, and he just started. So, you know for a fact that she kind of already deserves it just because of seniority. And I have this guy who's just being all nice to her boss. Then they order sandwiches and she has to go get them. And the other guy, yeah, me too, thanks. I'll have a turkey sandwich. And that's all he says. And when she brings back the food, he lifts his sandwich and says, oh, I ordered it without mayo. No, he didn't. No, you didn't, Stu, you little filthy liar. You lying liar, sack of lies. You see how this movie also already gets you a little bit on her side, on one side, But it plays with this thing where you're like, does she deserve it or not? So as she goes back to her place, there is Mrs. Ganoush with her very long, very gritty fingernails just drumming on the table and waiting for her. She's like, oh, I need a new loan because my house will foreclose and I will lose my entire life. And she's like, I don't know. I'll ask my boss. She goes to her boss and her boss is like, do what you need to do, Christine. Meaning don't give her the loan. And Christine, because she wants that chair with that desk that is going to give her seniority over everyone else, she decides not to give the loan. And that's when the scene comes. Mrs. Ganoush begs her. And then Mrs. Ganoush drops to her knees and there's a whole hullabaloo and the officers come because she's like, security. That's what Ganoush says. You shame me. You shame me. And the actress who plays Mrs. Ganoush is just first class. I have never been so scared of an elderly woman in my life. So you have this whole thing and her boss says you did the right thing. By the end of the day, Christine goes to her car with her things. And that's when we see for the first time, and anyone who knows Sam Raimi knows what that means, we see the 1973 Delta 88. That car has been in each and every single movie of his, even in his Western movie. I mean, I don't think it was in each and every movie of his because he directed 40 movies. However, The Quick and the Dead with Leonardo DiCaprio, by the way. So the Delta car has been in many of his movies. You see it in Doctor Strange, The Multiverse of Madness. And you see for the first time that yellow car that we already saw in Evil Dead and Sam Raimi keeps putting in his movies because it used to belong to his dad. And it seems to be like some kind of good luck charm apart from Bruce Campbell himself. By the way, he did ask Bruce Campbell to be in this movie, but he couldn't because he was filming Burn Notice. So you see that car waiting and she's all alone and it's really dark and you hear violins. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. It's so good. It's so good. And I love the music so much. It's like la. And the violins. It was absolutely amazing. There is no aspect of this movie I don't like. So she goes to her car and she has her things because she needs to work from home because, she's going to hustle now to get that job. She sits in her car and Mrs. Ganush is behind her and attacks her. And she calls her the B word a couple of times. Zaya! And pulls her hair. And that's when you get the most fantastic fight scene where Christine starts hammering the staple in her face and it gets onto two get in her eyes, stapling her eyes shut. And then Christine manages to throw her out of the car. And this whole entire scene is just so fantastically made. And there is so much, you're tense, okay? You are very tense during this scene. And at some point, Ganush manages to drag Christine out of the car, grabs the button of her coat, and that's when she curses her. The scene is also so well filmed because there is this blurry effect, and you see Mrs. Ganush just holding that button and just saying,
Sure. Yeah.
And puts the button back in, and Christine just, loses consciousness. And when she wakes up, there's cops and everything, and everyone is asking if she's fine. And her boyfriend just drives her home. And on the way home, they cross the psychic place. They cross that, and that's where we see Ramjas for the first time. And Justin Long is like the typical character is like, you believe in this stuff? And Ramjas has the session with her and he notices something's not right. And he's like, hey, listen, I think you've been cursed. So just be careful. And then they go home and they fall asleep. And Christine has this horrible, horrible nightmare where she's lying in bed, which is the worst kind of nightmare because you don't know if you're awake or not. And she's in bed and she turns around. And who does she see? Of course she does. Mrs. Ganush, but way scarier and way more dilapidated. And I love that the fact that Sam Raimi kind of brings it in again with the evil deadness of it all. In this dream, she's goes and attacks Christine again from above, and then she just pukes maggots into Christine's mouth. And at first, I was convinced that they actually, because they had this cannon full of, I thought, personally, maggots, but actually it was luckily just pasta. I'm so glad it was just pasta, but it looked so real that I actually thought it was really happening. So now we're getting into the curse, and we are getting the first little, minor inconveniences that are happening, just a little bit of, to get us, started. And now we'll get into complete spoiler territory. So if you don't want to get spoiled, please click off. And if you do want to get spoiled, let's move on. The next day when she wakes up, she goes to work. She's not okay. I mean, her hair is already a little more frazzled. She's also not exactly in the best mood. And she has this big case she needs to work on. That Stu, that filthy man, tries to get his hands on. And she's like, get your hands off my case. That's when her nose starts dripping and she projectile nosebleeds all over the place. She even sprays her manager and she's sent home. They did this scene, obviously, with practical effects. How else would Raimi do it? So the special makeup effects artist, Greg Nicotero, put a tube that went around her ear, went down her face, went into her nose. He plugged her nose, okay? And then he basically put the... Sorry, I don't know how else to show it. He put the tube into her nose so that when he would press the fake blood into it, it would rebound from the plug that he put in the nose and point downwards to make it more effective. I mean, and it sprayed close to 12 feet. So the spray was really strong. And there is a lot of pressure, Okay, that was fantastic. And it paid off so well because that scene is just so good. So she goes back home and she decides to go to Mrs. Ganush's house to kind of talk to her and say, like, listen, I don't know what you did to me. I'm really sorry, but please lift the curse. This is not fun. And she's greeted by Mrs. Ganush's daughter. And she is so... I mean, I understand why she reacted like that, because we get to know that Mrs. Ganush has died, and her daughter is like, you used to be a real fat girl. And that hurt me so much. I was not okay. I was like, I felt personally attacked. And then she says, oh, you want to see Mrs. Ganush? You do? You do? Okay, come down. And she then sees Mrs. Ganush's body. And she realizes Mrs. Ganush is dead. And there's nothing she can do. I mean, she's dead. How is she gonna, lift the curse? She can't. And that's when we get the next projectile vomit mouth problem with Christine, because the body falls on her, and I don't know what they use, but those embalming liquids then fall onto Christine's mouth, and it's like so gross. That was another mouthful, literally. And her dead hand kind of gets stuck in Christine's hair, and that's when her hair gets pulled for the second time. And it's just not a little, it's a whole bunch of hair that is just pulled, okay? And the music is just awesome. So Christine goes back to Ramjas and is like, listen, what's happening? I don't know what's happening. And he says, listen, you're being haunted by a demon, and I'm gonna give you a couple of books. And I'm guessing the best way that you can appease it, I guess, is by offering a small animal sacrifice. And Christine's like, no, I'm a vegetarian and I would never hurt an animal. And you see already before that she has this sweet little kitten. So you have Christine who goes home and said, listen, I'm not going to offer up any animal because are you crazy? I would never either. Honestly, I'd rather be dragged to hell than ever do something like that. And that's when you get one of the most nerve-wracking scenes, because that's when the Lamia really starts haunting her. You have the clanking of the pots and pans in her kitchen, and Christine rushes to her bedroom, and that's where you see the shadow of the Lamia just coming through the door and just picks her up by her feet and just starts swinging her around her entire bedroom, smashing her left and right. The next thing you see after she went through this whole ordeal is her looking for her kitten, and she says, here, kitty, 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 kitty. Listen, I have never been haunted by a demon, luckily. I have never been cursed by a gypsy woman, luckily. And I think that's where Raimi did a really clever thing, because he used a kitten, meaning she didn't have it for that long. I already have my cat since 9 years now, so I've grown very attached to it. But in comparison to Christine, I personally would not have sacrificed my cat. It's like, okay, fine, drag me to hell. I mean, maybe Constantine will save me. Yee. So you know how much fun that would be? Anyway, back to the whole kitten thing. So she sacrifices the kitten. I can't even say it loud because I feel so bad. And she's even crying, and she's like burying the kitten, and Justin Long comes and he's like, hey, are you up for visiting my parents? I mean, if you're not, we can also not go. And she's like, no, absolutely, we'll go. His parents are so judgy McJudgerson, like judgy, okay? They're like these hoity-toity people who are old money. And they own a cat, which makes me like them a little bit again. And Christine brings a cake, and his mother is like, oh, how quaint. The cat that they have hisses at Christine, which obviously, you just killed a kitten. You just sacrificed a kitten. And they sit down and they have dinner, and that's when the demon comes back to haunt her, which was a really bad idea. I mean, you're meeting his parents for the first time. Seriously, you think it's a good idea while you're being haunted? The thing was that since she sacrificed the kitten, she thought that everything was going to be fine, right? She was like, oh, no, it's fine. And everything is going to be great now. She's so sure of it. Little did she know, sacrificing a tiny little kitten was not going to bring anything against the mighty Lamia. And that's when we get our first eye of Raimi's. Anybody who's anybody and knows Raimi knows that Raimi is very fixated on eyes in a lot of his movies. And the eye just pops out of the harvest cake piece that she got. And she just stabs the eye and it starts bleeding. It was so good. It was such a good effect. And she screams at the air, "Leave me alone!" And the mother thinks she's crazy, and she even tells Justin Long, "I don't think she's a good fit for you." With her. You know, when people bite into a lemon, some people who are rich and have old money have that "I just bit a lemon" expression. Yeah, that one. Christine goes back to Ramjas and is like, "Listen, buddy, this didn't work." And he's like, "I never said it would work. I said it could work. Okay? It is a very powerful demon. So we need to call Sean Sandena and the medium who might be able to help you out. But it's going to cost you $10,000. And Christine is like, "I don't have that kind of money." And Justin Long is like, "Listen, $10,000 is like a lot of money. And how do we know this is going to work? And honestly, you're just traumatized and making things up." He doesn't say that she's making things up, but he's kind of alluding to it. That's when we get our second eye scene. Yes, we get two of them, where Christine goes home and she's like crying and sniffling, and she's in her tool shed looking for things that she could sell. And it's a very sweet scene because she's like so defeated. She's like, that's when I guess the Lamia again, but in form of Mrs. Ganoush, attacks her. She just slams her against something wooden in the shed, and Christine sees. This is where we get like the most Looney Tunes scene ever, okay? So there is this anvil hanging up. For whatever reason, I'm guessing anvils are just hung up in sheds. If that's true, please let me know in the comments, because I feel like I would never just hang up an anvil willy-nilly above my head where it could fall on my head. But anyway, it was conveniently placed there, and she unties the anvil. The anvil falls on Miss Ganoush's head, and her eyes pop out, landing in her mouth again. She's going through it, guys. She's going through it. And she's not okay. So anyway, I think Clay takes pity on her and is like, "Okay, listen, I'm gonna pay for it," because obviously he's rich. I would be like, "Listen, if you have so much old money, I think $10,000 are not a lot for you to spend on your struggling girlfriend who's like clearly not okay and needs some help." I mean, she's been through it, okay? Now we have the seance in this room, and you have Sean Sansena, you have Justin Long, you have Christine. Justin Long is waiting outside. So he doesn't even catch all of the stuff that is happening in the seance, which again makes him just be like the outsider that doesn't believe. Fun fact, she already faced the Lamia, remember, with the boy, and now she's like seeking revenge, and it's like, "I found you and I shall take care of this." And so they start a seance, and at first there's ghosties and whatever, and then the Lamia appears. And they have a sacrificial goat, because their plan is to trap the Lamia in the goat and then kill the goat so that the Lamia disappears. By the way, for this scene, a puppet goat was used. It's so good. We have the seance, the goat, and then Milos, who is her apprentice or helper or whatever, tries to kill the goat, but the goat bites his hand, making the Lamia enter his body, and then the medium needs to banish the Lamia from his body and can't complete the ritual. And the scene is also absolutely brilliant. We have Milos just rising in the air and dancing the most devilish dance ever. It was absolutely brilliant. So well filmed, so well lighted. Everything about the scene was just so evil in the best way possible, right? Sandena banishes the spirit and dies in the process, meaning she can't really help anymore. And Christine was like, okay, he's been banished, the demon. And Ramjas is like, nah, no, ma'am. He's been, for now, been banished, but he's going to come back. Your curse is not lifted yet. And then he is like, listen, the best thing you can do is give this button to someone else, because the button itself is cursed. And her having the button and owning the button makes it that she is also cursed. So the only thing that she can do is giving the button to someone else. So she goes to the diner and she calls Stu, which, same. I would have done exactly the same. So she calls Stu and is like, listen, Stu, get here or I will tell everyone that you sabotaged my client, which apparently he did. Like in the background, you notice that Stu had stolen her files and sabotaged the clients and sold it to another company. And she's like, I know it was you and I'm going to tell the boss. And he's like, no, my mom is going to find out. And he's like this whiny little pile of misery. And then she kind of takes pity on him all of a sudden and says, get away from me. Just go. Just freaking go, okay? Because she's like, okay, he doesn't deserve to go to hell either. Which is, again, kind of shows that she's not that bad of a person. She just made some really terrible choices. Then she calls Ramjas and is like, listen, can I just give it back to the dead person? And it's like, actually, you could, but you would have to exhume her body and then, literally give it to her. And this is where we get absolutely such a nice rage-filled scene. So she's driving to the cemetery where Mrs. Ganush was buried. It's like raining and she's digging that hole and finally finds Mrs. Ganush and she twacks open the coffin, and with the shovel, because she can't get Mrs. Ganush's mouth to open, she literally forces her mouth open and says, with this, the button in the envelope, with this, I, Christine Brown, give this button back to you, and shoves it into her mouth, and she just shoves the mouth closed again. And the next day, she's like, oh, wow, how great. I have managed to survive. I've given back the button. It's a new day. I'm going with my boyfriend to his parents' cabin, which, by the way, Sam Raimi actually said it was the cabin of Evil Dead. So I love that little nod that we get in Drag Me to Hell, and we know that it's the same world. I don't know, such small little details make me happy. So she goes to the train station to meet Justin Long to go to that cabin to have a nice weekend. And we see that he has a ring in his hand and he will be able to, propose to her. And she crosses a shop and sees this beautiful powder blue coat. And I feel like since this is a new beginning for her, she tells the shop owner she's going to buy the coat, and she throws the other coat in the trash to leave the past behind. And she meets Justin Long and he's like, hey, where's your coat? And she's like, that old thing, I threw it in the trash. And Justin Long was like, oh, how sad, because I still have the button. Now, what I didn't tell you is, I thought I would surprise you with it. While she's sitting in the car with him, he collects coins. And she gave him a coin and put it in an envelope. And the envelope that Ramjas had put her button in is suspiciously similar to the envelope that she put the coin in. And he full breaks at some point in the movie. All the envelopes fall on the floor, and she picks up the wrong envelope. And the envelope that landed in Mrs. Ganush's mouth was the one with the coin. And Justin Long had the one with the button. Yes. And now we get the best scene, okay? So he's all happy and giddy. She's all happy and giddy. And then he brings that envelope and he's like, I got your button. everything just falls. Even my heart just fell. I was like, no, are you serious? Is this really happening? And she gets dragged by arms down to hell while the train is going over them, and Justin Long just looks in complete disbelief because that's the first time he actually sees what's happening. Justin Long's face of disappointment and bewilderment was absolutely first class. The question now arises, right? Did she deserve it? I don't know. I don't think she deserved it. I think there's a lot of bad people here on this planet that deserved it way more than she did. But she made some choices and had some really bad times and got dragged to hell. And even that was made with prosthetics and a hole that they actually dug to be able to drag her down, mixed with CGI. And no, Sam Raimi definitely didn't think that she deserved it. He even said so in an interview with Bloody Disgusting. He was like, I feel the poor girl was overpunished, as it happens in life sometimes. And yeah, I feel like this movie really is pretty much like, yeah, well, life happens. And people even ask now if he's going to do a second part, and he said he's not sure because he doesn't know how to come back from it. Usually in Evil Dead, you have Bruce Campbell who keeps surviving, and that's how he can keep going with it. But with a character like Christine Brown, what is he going to do? However, he did say that if anyone has an idea, a really good idea, he wouldn't mind doing a second part. So any of you out there have an idea of doing a Drag Me to Hell 2, hit him up. Maybe he'll produce it or even direct it. Oh my God, can you imagine? That would make me so happy. I don't even know how to do the outro because I feel like the entire video right now that I have filmed is my thoughts and me telling you what this movie is about. And even me just recounting the story will not do it justice at all. I mean, you know now all the details, you know now all the facts, but honestly, you have to watch the movie to be able to immerse yourself in this absolute roller coaster, okay? There is no stopping it. Once it starts, the curse just keeps on giving and giving and giving. And Christine Brown is just completely and utterly helpless towards the Lamia. There is nothing that she can do. And that's what makes this movie so great. The relentlessness of it all, the cinematography of it, the lighting, the mood, the music. Oh my God, the music is absolutely fantastic. It just brings you back into this old school folklorish kind of mood that just lulls you into this beautiful horror element of it all. And yes, it's funny. This is how I like my horror movies. I like them fun, and I like them bloody, and I like them relentless. I also like movies that are a little more dreary and drag me down. I feel like for every movie like that, you need also a movie that makes you like enjoy it again, right? I want to be dragged into the muddy terribleness of it all, but I also want to be uplifted by awesome scenes of a human being suffering from a curse. I'm wording it wrong again, but you know what I mean. And on that note, let me know what you thought of the movie, or if you've already watched the movie, if you didn't like it, why you didn't like it. And if you haven't watched the movie yet, if you're looking forward to seeing it now. This was me screaming into the void. I hope you enjoyed it. And thank you for staying until the end. And see you next time. Bye.